All right, everyone. Welcome to the Stoa. Today we have our friend Alyssa Polizzi returning. Alyssa is an educator and coach of symbolic systems of thought, and she does the tarot. And today is she's going to guide us through an experiment called the Collective Tarot. And I have no idea how it's going to work. So I'm going to hand the keys over to Alyssa in a moment. And she's just going to give the instructions. I don't even know how long we're here today. I think maybe 90 minutes or a little bit more. But she's going to present her screen. It's going to be an interactive session. So that being said, Alyssa, welcome back to the Stoa, and handing the keys over to you.
Thank you, Peter. So good to be back. What's up, everyone? I'm Alyssa. Maybe you've seen me here at the Stoa before. I think this is really the first time that we're exploring tarot here at the Stoa. And I think it's a wonderful modality to bring forth to the collective here because it is powerful both as a personal practice, but also as a practice of sharing. So we're really going to kick off today by doing a little bit of an intro into tarot, why it's useful, but also as a means to give you some space and really a container to dive deep into what's happening for you at this moment. So it'll be part educational, part experiential. And I certainly encourage you all to participate and share, drop questions in the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. So Collective Tarot, this is the idea. As I mentioned before, I really want this to be a time of us coming together, not just me sitting here and lecturing, but we are going to start out with a short lesson. I want to just provide a little bit of a grounding, a little bit of a foundation for you to understand tarot, especially if you're completely new or you're wanting to approach it in this new way. So we'll kick off with a short lesson, have an exercise, then we're going to draw cards. If you brought cards today, that's awesome. If not, no worries. I will draw cards for you. We'll interpret it, and then we're going to open up the floor for discussion and sharing. So a little bit about tarot. What is the tarot? It is this set of 78 cards, each with a different symbolic representation of universal experiences or archetypal experiences, we might say. The tarot, I believe, is so powerful because each card really acts as this portal or gateway into life experiences, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, challenges, opportunities. Anytime you draw a card, you're being shown something that already sort of exists inside of you, and it's your goal to connect to it in some way, to cultivate a conversation with what's being represented in the card itself. And tarot really, I think, works so powerfully because it utilizes imagery and metaphor and narrative. I think those are really the cornerstones of the system of tarot. So when you look at a card, I'm just gonna kind of show it on my screen really quick. This is the Five of Cups. The imagery itself evokes a collective experience. Here we see a figure who is shrouded in black. Their head is turned down. There are cups spilled over. You might start to feel a sense of heaviness, of loss, of sadness. Even if you don't know the cards, if you were to see this image, you could sort of start telling a story. You could relate it to some experience that you've had. And that's why each card really is archetypal. They are representations of collective experiences or instincts. We know how to relate to an image that seems so familiar and yet at the same time sort of transcends the personal experience. It includes all of us. So the tarot does bring us into like the collective experience of humanity, but it also puts our own personal experience front and center. It kind of is this bridge between all of that. And I invite us to think about using tarot as a form of divination, not so much as fortune telling, the way that it might be looked at in a really stereotypical manner, but more symbolically, I see divination as being open to the revelations of the deep psyche, of the unconscious. We can think even of old mythological stories, or the idea of going to the oracle to receive guidance from a god as a means of opening ourselves to non-rational knowing or wisdom or insight that doesn't just come from sitting down and thinking, how do I solve this problem? It comes from something deeper inside of us, something more spiritual, you might say, something more subtle. And that's what tarot does. That's why it has this ability to really expand us and open us up. Tarot, we're also going to be using as a form of inquiry, or as a tool of inquiry here today. We can think of inquiry really as this activity where we engage in something that's going to help us challenge not only our conscious understanding, but gain insight and bring us this sense of clarity. Often, when we engage in inquiry, there's a recognition that there's something that we don't fully know or understand in a situation, and yet there's the potential for us to dig deep and find those answers inside of ourselves, or through a kind of dialectic with someone else or something else. So, in this sense, we're using tarot as that dialectical tool. We are engaging our conscious awareness with the unconscious depths, and we're doing that through that symbolic archetypal imagery that the tarot is made up of. I think tarot also really is powerful as this tool of inquiry because it works as a projective container, because each card is so relatable. Here's the Three of Cups, three individuals sort of dancing around with their hands raised high. You can think about where you've experienced this before, the last time you were hanging out with your friends, and there was that sense of revelry, of joy, of partying and having fun. There's this ability for us to see ourselves in the cards. And when we do that, we can not only relate to it, but it can really challenge our conscious perspective. I think that happens because, on the one hand, the cards are relatable, but on the other hand, we don't just look through the deck and choose the card that we want. We draw them at random. And when we do that, we're really being challenged to relate to the card, to relate to the theme, to figure out how it is connecting to whatever we're considering at that moment. And when that happens, it really offers a lot of new points of view. It might make you realize that you've been hiding something from yourself. Maybe it's forcing you to admit a difficult truth, or to acknowledge something really powerful about yourself. So, in that way, it kind of shifts your conscious perspective, or it offers these corrective or these different insights that you just wouldn't have gotten elsewhere. The tarot is like a good friend in that way. It just sort of mirrors back to you with these slight nuances that really help you approach a situation in a totally different way. So we're going to do a quick exercise. We're going to get into a bit of the experiential, so I can stop talking here. This card, this is the Two of Cups. I want you guys to just look at it for a moment and think about what keywords come to mind. How might you define this card? What does it bring up for you? And I just want you to drop those words into the chat and just start to see what everyone is saying. Are there any body sensations, any particular emotions, any thoughts? How might you define this card by looking at it? Yeah. Mutual respect, connection, exchange, union, healing relationships. I like that. Sacred marriage, reciprocity. Yeah. So we all seem to sort of be circumambulating something really similar here. Maybe this is the first time you've seen this card, maybe not, but there's something about it. And you can start to ask yourself, well, what is it about the card or the image that seems to communicate reciprocity, exchange, the intertwining, the mutual healing? You can see maybe it's the openness of both of their stance towards each other, or that they're sort of seeming to exchange these cups, and they're both level, not one's not above the other. Their poses, the way that they're looking at each other, maybe it's that powerful lion caduceus in the middle that seems to evoke something really deep and energetic. And that's what I think is so interesting about the tarot, is that it's these images and these symbols are highly refined to evoke something deep within us, so that it's relatable no matter who picks up the cards, and yet each of us can kind of find a key word or an understanding. So to expand on this exercise, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. We're going to keep looking at the Two of Cups here. I want you to think further about what details or imagery catch your eye, what feelings or emotions are coming up, and take it a step further into the personal layer of experience. Consider a time in your life when you've experienced these dynamics that are coming up for you, and just write a little bit about it. This is just a short exercise meant to demonstrate what's happening when we're using tarot. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes, maybe about 3 or 4 minutes, to just sit with the card, look at it, let it sort of open you up, let it unfold, and see what comes up. And we'll share a little bit and then we'll move forward. So go ahead, take some time, do a little bit of reflection, and I will call everybody back to attention when we're ready to move on. All right, so I'm interested what's coming up for people. This is sort of our time to open it up to the collective and see what the card brought forth for you. So if you want to share in the chat so others can read, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and share a little bit, maybe about the certain keywords, maybe what imagery really caught your eye, or if you want to share how you related to it. Yeah, you can go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, thanks. I really like the connection in the eyes, this complicity that's there, like they're really coming together. And I like how that lion with wings seems to be an emanation of the energy that gets created between them, and that's even protecting them and sheltering them in some way. I like the fact that the character on the right seems to be making a step forward, so maybe initiating things, and even with the touching of the hand, so, and that it's being welcome and accepted. There's this tilt of the head from the lady that seems to be appreciating that. So I like to imagine there was like a before and after, like maybe things weren't so clear before, or some challenge or conflict, and that this initiative is appreciated, and some kind of, yeah, that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Yeah, that was beautiful. I love all that subtle nuance that you got. And what's really interesting, I think, especially about the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is really one of the classic decks, that we see that there's all this nuance in the details that seems to just reveal itself the more that you look. And even I'll find, after having worked with the cards for years and years, that there are little things that suddenly come out that I hadn't noticed before. So like that, the stance of the figure on the right, kind of that initiating movement, or that he's reaching his hand out. So all these small details that are included in the classic decks that in and of themselves tell their own story, or kind of add to the symbolism. So thank you for sharing. There's a lot of great comments. Sula, you're raising your hand. Yeah, you want to share?
Yes, hi. I liked that there's a little bit of feminine on the apparently the guy, and a little bit of masculine on the woman. There's a soothing presence on both, on each one of them, and there is an equal exchange. The cups are at the same level, and there seems to be, a partnership there, connection. I like the red on her shoes and the red on the lion, and that evokes passion on me. And what it evokes in me is sadness about lacking this in my life.
Yeah, thank you. It's when you start to take it just from that sort of impersonal symbolic level into the personal, it's so interesting what starts to come up. How does this apply to your life, for you? And thank you for sharing that. It evokes some sadness, that there's a feeling of a void. And that's where I think tarot can feel really provocative for people, is that it's showing us or highlighting certain areas that we do need to pay attention to. And it can be difficult to be faced with that. Tarot is this mirror, and when we look into it and we see reflected back to us these difficult dynamics or aspects that we're not fulfilling, or potentials that are just there under the surface, it can feel a little overwhelming. It's always interesting to me to see the reaction people have to even the idea of getting a tarot reading, because it's like you don't want to go there. But if we're willing, if we have that sort of courage to do that inner work, the tarot can open us as like that doorway, that pathway into our own depths, so that we can consider, why am I lacking that in my life? How can I cultivate it? What are the dynamics of that? So it really creates that sort of container of really deep, very, very powerful inner work. Anyone else want to share before we move on? Okay, thank you. Hopefully you had some time to look at the comments too. I'm seeing a lot of personal expression here, but also a lot of similarity in what came up or what really stuck out. So I appreciate everybody sharing here. We're going to move on to doing more of the practical exercise with the cards, but before we do that, I really want to give some space for very general questions about anything that I've talked about so far, anything that's come up. I know sometimes when we're working with the cards that there can be confusion around the system itself before we move into pulling them, or if there's any points that I made that you'd like me to expand upon, I would love to be able to answer those. So if you've got a question, feel free to unmute or drop your question in the chat.
If I may.
Okay. Yes.
So I really like what we're doing. I got a tarot card set myself, and
Cool.
but I'm also in between worlds. So one of the questions of me playing devil's advocate is if I have a concern of mine, and if I understand it correctly, any of those cards is a possibility that is equally as good or valid as any other. All right. Why should I take particular question to this one with the chance that maybe there is a more appropriate answer with any of the other cards? All right. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but you know, it's if somebody from external says, like, I don't know, your style, or it's much easier to do it this way, but why would you pay attention to that? And so I'm trying to resolve that. Or
Sure.
what do you guys talk about?
Sure. I mean, I think in part it's about approaching the cards in a way that's grounded not so much in finding concrete answers or having something definitive delivered to you, but rather using it as that springboard towards exploration or towards inquiry or towards expanding your awareness. And when that happens, the holding of many possibilities is actually a virtue rather than something that limits you or feels overwhelming or makes you question the validity of the cards. I think moving away from using the cards as, you know, when I pull this one card, it's going to give me the exact answer I need, but rather as this moment of kind of bridging what's inside of you to the outer world. And it's like creating a synchronicity, really, because there's something internal inside of you that needs to be known. And we use the cards, you know, we pull them and it acts as this outward objective symbol container through which we can reflect. And when those synchronous moments happen, we honor the image that comes forward. So you might be able to say, pull another card and find just as much of a sense of truth or an answer in it, but those limitations to just allowing yourself to come into the moment and pull a card and just stick with it and see where it takes you, I think is part of the cards helping you grow. And as I mentioned, not so much approaching it as looking for those definitive answers, but rather as just a time to go inward, reflect. And if you're working with other people, if you're facilitating that experience, it's important to communicate that, because I think there's a kind of instinct inside of us to want answers, to turn towards the cards or towards a therapist even, or a friend for the truth or for a answer to our problems. And things are never that simple. So we don't use the cards to sort of strip us of our autonomy, but rather just to act as that space for us to do that deep consideration. And I think when that happens, you can walk away feeling that you got the insights that you needed.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Yeah, you're welcome. Question from Clifford here. How to distinguish between insights from the subconscious and superconsciousness? I mean, it depends on what your definition of those things are. To me, I would look at it more as what comes forward when you're working with tarot is all a part of you. And you can sort of say that's God, or that's your unconscious or subconscious or some higher deity, but it's all sort of being communicated and flowing through you. Like you are the conduit for it. And all of these abilities to tap into this inner wisdom exists inside of you, but there are subtleties. There's the patterns that we have, the emotions that we feel often, the thoughts that we think readily. And then there's something deeper inside of us. And I haven't really gotten to any like unconscious theory here because it's just a collective simple event. But in my mind, when we work with tarot, we kind of let our ego step aside. We let our usual conscious functioning mind sort of settle, and we sort of allow things to rise up from the depths. And when that happens, it's easy to question and say, well, that wasn't really me, or I don't know if I can believe that, or maybe it's something else. But it's about just honoring, I think, what comes forth in that intuitive sense. And if it feels a little strange, if you don't know where that thought came from, but it's helpful or it's challenging in a useful way, then honor it, meet it, invite it in, and allow that to just be another voice that sort of enhances your ability to understand what's going on inside of you. I often hear a lot of people when they work with tarot or really other forms of more sort of implicit, intuitive knowing, that it's really hard to trust. And I think it's just an act of faith that one has to have to say, you know, I'm open to what's coming forward, whether it comes in an image or a thought or an emotion or a body sensation. That is a message for you. And the tarot helps facilitate that experience. So I hope that helps. Any other questions? No? Okay, cool. So we're going to move forward with a tarot spread. It's always useful when we're approaching the tarot to have some sort of question, to have an intention, to know why you're approaching the cards. As you, of course, get more used to working with them, you can sort of leave this step out if you want. But for those who are new or those looking to get the most out of the experience, we take some part of our life, we sit with it, we meditate on it, and then we pull the cards to get our insight. So I have designed a prompt for us today, which is to consider a goal that you have right now in your life. Maybe you're wanting to achieve something, maybe you want to start a new habit, maybe you're wanting to make a change. When you think about what is a goal in your life right now, like what comes to mind? And I want you to describe that, write it down, make it real, describe it just in a short paragraph, and then we're going to pull some cards on that. So I'm going to give you another couple of minutes to think about what you want to pull cards on today, and then we're going to move forward with the tarot reading. So I'll give you about 2-3 minutes to do a little bit of writing, and then we'll move forward. All right, hopefully you've got your goal in mind, you've written about it, thought about the different dynamics of what that might mean for you, focused really the intention, and now it's time to pull some cards. So keeping it really simple today, a 2-card spread. Very quickly, I will say that there is no wrong or right way to pull tarot cards. You can shuffle them and lay them out and draw them at random. You can pull them from the top of the deck. You can read reversals. You cannot read reversals. It's really up to you. So I'm inviting you to pull cards however you like today, just honoring what comes natural, what your usual practice is. With this idea in mind, the first card that you draw is going to represent an opportunity. And you're going to kind of reflect on this and do a little bit of writing as you draw that first card. This first one represents how or what might help you achieve your goal. So you really have to think as you pull that card at random, sort of evoking that moment of synchronicity, what comes up, what image is being presented to you. And you're going to look at the card, you're going to consider the emotions that come up, think about that exercise, what imagery is really reaching out to you from the card. And then you can read the definition and write what might help you achieve your goal based on this card. I'm going to give you an example in a moment. Card number 2 kind of represents the block. So we want to look at both what's helping you expand and maybe what's kind of contracting you inwardly. So what's blocking you from achieving this goal? This might relate in a way that feels new, that you hadn't understood that this was a block. Maybe you will recognize the tensions in this card as something you've been struggling with for a while. No matter what comes up, it's really showing you and reflecting back to you that when you're considering achieving things in your life, that there are going to be some roadblocks, but at the same time, there are also opportunities for you to break through it or to take a step forward on that path. So here is an example. My goal is to embrace changes after moving, which is very recent. Just in the last few weeks, I moved. I want to be open to new experiences. I want to be able to really make the most of this new chapter in my life. So I drew the first card, the opportunity, which is the Chariot. And the Chariot really is a card of taking an initiative, taking control, understanding the dynamics, and knowing that if I want to make movements, I am the initiating force. And the Charioteer sort of sits in that place, in a way, having a understanding of what is required for things to move forward, is coming from that deeply personal place of empowerment. But there is also a sense of different dynamics, different forces at play in the Chariot: the Black Sphinx and the White Sphinx, the yin and the yang, right? The contraction and the expansion, the dualities at life. And so I like the Charioteer because he is in a relationship with these dynamics. He's not just bulldozing through and destroying everything in his path. He's coming into a balance with it, into a relationship. So for me, the opportunity is to understand all of these nuances in this moment and to seize where I need to seize the opportunity, and maybe just to hold back where I need to hold back and wait a little bit. So to me, the Chariot is a very interesting push to not sit back too much, but at the same time understand when those nuances are at play. Card number 2 for me, the block, is the Six of Wands reverse. When this card is upright, there's really a feeling of triumph and victory and kind of stepping into a space with a lot of confidence. And I think for me, the block represents that despite the potential that the Chariot has for me to feel in control, to feel excited, for there to be forward motion and movement, I also have to recognize that there's a part of me that feels resistant, that feels scared, that doesn't know how to step into new opportunities, doesn't want to be put out into the collective. I always like to think of the Six of Wands as the hero coming in the victory parade. And so there's a part of me that doesn't want to do that. That reversal shows a tension there. So if I want to have success, if I want to be like the Chariot, I also have to understand that there's a part of me that's resisting that. So how do I work with it? What am I going to do practically? How can I meditate on that? What different skills can I bring in to address it? These are the kind of questions you can ask yourself. That's all prompted by the cards. So that is our spread. Card 1, opportunity. Card 2, block. If you have cards, go ahead and draw them now and begin to do some writing and reflection. And if you don't have cards, you can message me directly or just let me know in the chat, and then I'm going to pull them for you. One last thing, Aaron, my lovely assistant here, is going to drop a document. And this is a set of definitions for you to use if you don't have access to definitions right now. We created these. They are for your use during this event. So you can reference them as you pull your card, read what the definition sheet shows, but also utilize the card's imagery itself and follow what comes up that way. So as Peter's doing right now, let me know if you do not have cards. I will draw them for you. Otherwise, go ahead and draw your 2 cards and begin doing your exercise. All right, so it's been around 8 minutes or so since you've maybe started to pull your cards, and maybe you need a little bit more time. Maybe there's a sense of questions. I think the first couple of minutes after the cards, when you sit with them, you maybe start to get insights, but it often can lead to more questions. So I want to begin to open up the floor for people. The sharing can really help you see the cards that you've pulled in a different way, or you can ask me for clarification, or some insight you're looking for with the cards that you drew. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, or to share what they have come up with their cards, or if you want to drop that in the chat, please feel free to do so.
Hi, I'll start. Hi, Alyssa.
Sure. Hi.
Hi. So one of the things when I shuffle my cards, I let my jumpers be my cards,
Yeah.
and because spontaneity, I'm trying to embrace it. And really interestingly, my block card actually came face up first. So my first card didn't. So I always read those, whichever ones come face up. So my block being my 3 of swords.
Okay.
Even before I turned around the first card, this is kind of like, I already know. I break my own heart. I hurt my own feelings. This isn't about, me still being hurt or me just going through the process. It's how I keep picking a scab, regardless of what my opportunity is.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for doing the session. I missed
It's
it.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I love that sharing, because there's often difficulty for a lot of people when they pull like the bad cards. There are no bad cards, but the scary cards, the dark cards, the ones that seem to show us something that's tough to look at. And how do we see all the nuances in these cards? What happens when we get a positive card in the block position? There's all these ways that the tarot is going to challenge our ability to understand or define certain things in our life. And that 3 of swords there was just like such a beautiful example of how you can take something that feels so difficult to look at and yet see the opening that's in it. Even when we pull kind of the scary dark cards in the block position, what is the opening? What is the way through? How is it also showing you the potentials for how to move through those challenges or through those blocks? And I think that's what's so amazing about working with any sort of archetypal system, is it's so multi-varied, so nuanced. It's not just pure good or pure bad. You can see all of nature's dualities in it. So thank you for that sharing. The floor is open if you would like to.
Hi.
Oh.
We're competing. Go ahead.
Please go. Let's see. Who wants to go next?
Shall I go? Hi.
Yeah,
My
sure.
name is
Go ahead.
Riquetta. Hi.
Hi, how are
The
you?
funny thing, hi, thank you for this, by the way. It's really helpful because I've always had difficulty interpreting cards. And the funny thing is, I drew the cards you showed us.
Okay,
So the
interesting.
opportunity cards was the 3 of cups and the block card was the 5 of cups.
Okay.
And for me, actually, it makes quite a lot of sense because the block card is what I fear most, I think, for my goal. So, and the 3, the opportunity card is probably how I can get through it. but the block, for me, it made a lot of sense because I've had a lot of despair, sickness around me for a long time. So that's why, not me personally, but in my surroundings. So I think that's what I fear most. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Just to show everybody that image again, the 5 of cups. All the 5s in the tarot really represent a lot of important moments of challenge that we see in the expression of the minor arcanas, and it's our ability to meet these challenges that really takes us into the next half of the journey. So anytime we see a 5 in the tarot, we're dealing with something that's quite difficult. We are dealing with something that is forcing us into an uncomfortable place. I always like to point out, though, with the 5 of Cups, and this, of course, is with the Rider-Waite style deck, that there are 3 cups on the bottom that are spilled over and 2 behind the individual still standing. So what does that mean? What happens when the individual sort of turns around, or when they can
Yes.
move away from that identification with what is spilled or what is lost? It doesn't say we ignore the grief or the pain, but at a certain point we'll be ready to move forward and kind of cross that bridge and move on in the journey. So these little images in the card are offering us these sort of little antidotes or potentials of how to even work with the theme that's present here. Thank you for sharing.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Well, I just bought my new tarot cards, so I'm brand new to this.
Awesome.
And the first card I got is this one,
Oh, the death card.
which makes me, of course. Then I just wrote all kinds of stuff down in my book, going, "Oh my god!" Anyway, so I presume I'm not supposed to react that it's happening tomorrow. But so anyway, so at first I was scared. I actually was scared, but then at first I also thought, well, is this? But then as I looked at it a little more, the thing I'm trying to do is something is kind of the opposite of what I'm really good at. So I don't want to give it up, and it's kind of saying, give it up, and that's what I kind of got out of it. But it's not a good feeling when you get this card first time you've ever pulled one, I'll tell you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's one of the scary ones, as I mentioned. But I would sort of invite you to think about what death is on a symbolic level, because each of these cards are symbolic representations of experiences. So death, whether it shows up in a tarot card, or even if you have a dream of something dying, or we think about mythologically, when death is expressed, it is about change, and it is about letting go. It's about the turning of seasons. Death really is a representation of like these natural chapters of arcs of openings and closings, or of rebirth, or the, spring bringing new life, yet at the same time leading towards the coldness of winter. So death is about change, and it is about, can we ease into a process in our life that is bringing something new, yet at the same time knowing that you have to let something go. And it's hard when death comes knocking on the door. We want to resist that change. We want to resist letting things sort of slip away or die within us. But it is the natural order of life, and that is what death represents, which is why, especially in the Rider-Waite image, we have that figure of death, like the horseman, coming for the clergyman, for the king, for the child, for the mother with him. Nobody is safe from death's grip, from change, really. So can we allow that to be a rebirth rather than a painful death that we're resisting? So it is a scary card, but it's a lovely initiation, I would say, into what tarot is and what it can offer you. So I hope you found it helpful. Rebecca just dropped an interesting question here. How does death relate to the moon? Towers from the moon card are in the background. Very astute. The towers, especially in the Rider-Waite card, show up in a few of the cards. I'm going to try to cycle through and find the moon card. The moon is an archetype I always associate of shadow and of the darkness, and the ability to kind of move into places inside of us that don't often see the light of day. And that isn't in and of itself a difficult place to enter into. It's also like a threshold, you might say. And so I like to think of those double towers, which are very, very subtly, you probably can't see it in the background of the death card. These are doorways of initiation. These are doorways kind of past the veil into these deeper parts of ourself, into uncomfortable places, to transformational places. So you see also those towers in the moon card, and there is that relationship there. I think when you see repeated imagery in cards, you should think about how they relate or what they seem to be saying, that theme? How is it carrying over? How is it also in the death card? How is it also in the moon card? It's a little bit more prominent in the moon, the sort of double towers right here. So the moon is really like things emerging from the depths, the ability to step into lunar consciousness. We experience many forms of death, I think, when we are in the moon, because we go into the dark time, we go into the depths of ourself. But that's also where new energy is rising up as well. And that sort of connects us to those death and birth cycles that we see in the death card, of course. So thanks for that great question. Anybody want to unmute and share?
Can I go?
Yeah, please.
Hi, Alyssa. Hi, Peter. Okay, so my goal was quite pedestrian. I'm working on an art project. I need someone to help me with my Arduino code. And I've been fishing around trying to find someone to help. And of my very, very well shuffled deck pulled 3 of Cups as my opportunity and the 2 of Cups as the block. So I realized what this means to me is and it's true, I've been asking like close friends and associates if they know somebody, if they know somebody. And this is obviously telling me I need to like you know, open it up and ask fun groups. So I said, let me unmute and ask this group, anybody an Arduino coder? And does anybody know an Arduino coder who is up for a challenge? And I'm happy to pay a consultation fee, tutoring fee, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not for free, it's for pay, but I figured I'd do that. And so I unmute. So say hi, everybody. And just drop it in the chat if anybody even knows what I'm talking about in terms of coding Arduinos or Raspberry Pis, etc.
Thank you. Thank you for that, honoring that 3 of Cups, right? This is the community card in my mind. And so it's a really nice way to bring that up. Message her, drop it in the chat, be awesome if that connection, but you know, it doesn't end here certainly either. Where else do you expand into the communal space? How do you open the bubble so it's not just the 2 of Cups? And I love that, especially because we worked with the 2 of Cups earlier, and it's like, oh, it's connection and it's reciprocity. It's like, yeah, but what about when those cards end up in the difficult position? It's like sometimes our tendency to go towards something easy, something that feels fluid or open or accessible, is also a limitation. And that's what I love, especially when those positive, nice cards end up in difficult positions in a tarot spread, because it forces us to think about our habitual patterns and how that might also be keeping us stuck. So it's a great example of that. Thank you.
Fun.
On that note, Lizelle also said, how do you interpret a positive card in the difficult negative position or in the block? She got the Hierophant guidance. There's a lot of different ways to take that. And I would consider first how we were speaking about the 2 of Cups here. The Hierophant as a figure of guidance, or often as the figure of walking towards solutions that are things that are well known, things that are accepted, collective ideas, things that are typical. You know, maybe there's something about that dynamic of the Hierophant that actually is working against you in this situation where your goal is being considered. Maybe it's about getting out of the box, because often with the Hierophant, we're thinking about conventionality, or we're thinking about moving towards other people who represent Hierophant-like figures, authority figures, people who know more. Is there some sort of reliance on that is actually blocking you? Maybe it's more of an inner guidance that you need rather than an external. You know, do you need to find the inner Hierophant? Or is there a type of ways that you're in a system or in a relationship to something that is kind of preventing you because it holds that kind of authority over you, or because it represents something that you acquiesce to, or because it has higher knowledge than you? So I would sort of move around the Hierophant through all of those possibilities and see if there's something about that dynamic that is keeping you stuck. Karen, I've pulled positive. The Four of Swords as a block, I have pulled this several times this week. This is a really great example of how the cards seem to follow you. It's very uncanny. A card just showing up all of the time. 3 times out of 5 times that you pull cards, you get the same one. Why does it happen? It's a bit of a mystery in my mind, but it is an interesting opportunity to see what it is about this theme that is calling your attention, that you need to address. In the case of the Four of Swords as a block, I often see the Four of Swords as that ability to find the peace of the mind, or to be challenged to gain clarity again, especially if there's been sense of hardship. The Four of Swords acts like as this balm, really, of us being able to find the stillness or to find that space again. So if it's coming up in this case in the block, I would wonder how that has been a struggle for you, or is there any way in which you have been doing things that kind of go against the need for that? How might the Four of Swords help you? And if it could help you, how are you acting upon that, or how are you not acting upon that? So that might be a way to consider how it's being more of a block. On the flip side, and always, because there's multiple perspectives to have, I think sometimes the Four of Swords can show too much of being sort of stuck in inertia, or maybe you've had your time of respite or rest and it's time for you to move out of it. So that is like another way that I would consider that sort of nice healing card to be maybe challenging you to move out of that time of holding back, or of feeling like you need to gather your thoughts or find that clarity of mind. Maybe you've found it and you're stuck in a place where you just haven't left the kind of the warmth and the healing space of the Four of Swords, and maybe it's time to do that. So hopefully something in there resonates for you, or sparks some insight. Any other questions? Anyone else want to share?
If I may.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, somebody else wanted.
Why don't you go ahead and then we'll move on to hers.
Thank you. So I pulled that one for like the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It for me looks like it has to be a massive, obvious sign for me to go ahead, because it's not going to happen otherwise, like a miracle kind of thing. Like I cannot miss. But then as a block, I pulled the Hanged Man. So I feel like I don't know if it's really a positive or not, because either I interpret it as like I could not be disciplined enough to achieve that goal, or it could be a sign of wisdom, like if I'm stuck here, I'll be happy, right? So I don't know if it's really positive or it's just like I should get my act together and get out of that. So I have these two extremes, like.
Yeah, the reconciliation between a card that seems to expand and a card that seems to contract is always an interesting place to be. But yeah, I would start with that opportunity card, especially being Judgment, a major arcana, very powerful archetype, feeling that call to kind of step into something really powerful in your life that is kind of walking that higher path. That's often where I see Judgment, as that ability to be reborn into something new, something elevated, something transcended. And the block, of course, with the Hangman is that kind of figure of wisdom, but he also knows when it's time to come down from that tree. And so when I think about that as a block, I might lean a little bit into what's causing the resistance for you. Maybe you've gained the wisdom that you needed. I always like to mythologically kind of connect the Hangman to Odin. You know, he knew that he needed to hang himself from the tree and to sacrifice to gain something. But at the same time, you also know when it's time to leave that space. And so are you ready? But the block is kind of showing that there might be some of that resistance, or maybe you're questioning if you have what it takes. And I would say that the the two cards together would indicate you do have what it takes. It's about just taking those steps or allowing yourself to answer, you know, the sirens that are calling to you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Helps.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's someone else who
Hi.
wanted to speak. Hi, how's it going?
Hello. It's going well, thank you. And thank you for doing this.
Mhm.
So my question was around launching my business.
Okay.
And I got the King of Wands, which looks like this on the cards that I have,
Beautiful. Cool.
and the Moon,
Okay.
which looks like this. What I read is that I have a strong vision and determination into launching this business. I'm taking the steps thoughtfully.
Mhm.
However, I also noticed that on the background of the King of Wands in this representation, we have the moon.
Mm.
So it's like a type of a double moon situation. And so on the block, I have the moon. And so my first instinct is that I have a tendency to wanting to know all the steps of the way and being like super squared.
Mm.
So I would read the moon first as being afraid of not knowing that I'm going to be successful in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I also see that it's a pink moon. So there's also a part of me which asks myself, like, am I delusional? Like, am I seeing everything with pink lenses?
Mm.
Which overall defines my question, which is like questioning myself a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the realm of the moon. Often when the moon is present, it is very disorienting. We can think about it as what it's like to walk around in the darkness of night with no lights really to guide us, or maybe just a bit of moonlight. It's hard to see your surrounding. It's hard to know the exact path. So when we're in that place of the moon, there is a lot of doubt. There can be a lot of fear. There can be a lot of uncertainty. And it's a very real experience for all of us. But despite that, within the moon card itself also is the ability to navigate through those uncertainties, or to sort of trust the path that you're on that is leading to something deeper, while recognizing that you don't have all the answers right now. I think that's what's interesting about the moon, is that you can't be in the light of day. You can't have all the answers. You can't be in the sun and have all of this clarity. You maybe need to keep working to bridge the two, because the King of Wands is such this fiery visionary, and maybe the key for you being able to endure or sustain walking through the moon is to not let it hold you back completely, but recognize that that's the moment you're in, but your vision, your energy, what's guiding you, that guiding light, is internal. And so keep following it, because that's your opportunity. That's the power of the King of Wands. And it can help you navigate the moon and maybe recognize where your fears are coming from and resolve them, and then gain that greater clarity as you move forward.
Okay, thank you so much, Alyssa. Like, just a follow-up question on this.
Sure.
When is it that like I'm starting to overinterpret? So for example, I'm like, oh, this is a pink moon. And I have this tendency of like overinterpret everything.
Sure.
But indeed, my first stuff was like, oh, this is the moon. So she shows me the way, even though I don't know everything. So it was like rather positive. And then I like overinterpret it to make it negative.
Yeah. I think it's typical for a lot of us to do that, because we don't often get those exact definitive answers with tarot. And it's, I think, just about building an awareness that you're taking it a little far, or you are overinterpreting, or you're overthinking it, watching yourself, watching your tendencies. And I think that's why tarot can also be a practice in mindfulness as well, is when to slow down, when to step away, when to not go to the cards. If you find yourself wanting to turn to them over and over again, or just sit and study them for so long, that is probably the time when you know you need a little bit space. So just inviting in those mindful practices, I think, can really help with that.
Yeah, and actually, thank you, because I understand that my block is overthinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. We're probably going to wrap up now. We're at about an hour and 15 minutes in. So I just want to thank everybody for coming. I'll stick around for another couple minutes afterwards to answer any questions. But I appreciate you all coming. Hopefully you got something out of our session and you take these skills further into your life. Thank you, Peter, for allowing me to host Collective Tarot today. And thanks all for coming.